old hag! Do you think you can just steal my boyfriend? You're disgusting. A cougar preying on young men. Don't you have any shame chasing after someone who could be your son? Her voice, sharp as a razor, tore through the false quiet of my office. Every head in the cubicle farm snapped up, eyes wide with curiosity and thinly veiled judgment. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. My face burned a furious blush spreading from my neck to my hairline, fueled by shame and utter disbelief. I stood there frozen like a deer caught in headlights as her accusations rained down on me. Dylan, who had been waiting for me just outside, having just finished his own training session, rushed in, his face pale with alarm, his eyes wide with a mixture of shock and concern. He immediately stepped between us, trying to shield me to calm her down, his voice low and urgent. "Chloe, stop! This isn't what you think." But it was too late. She had her phone out, a predatory glint in her eye, snapping pictures of me. My face, a mask of shock and humiliation. My hair disheveled, my eyes wide with unshed tears. The flash was blinding momentarily, searing the image of her furious face into my mind, a snapshot of my life being torn apart. Before I could even process what was happening, before the echoes of her accusations had faded from the office, the pictures were everywhere. Social media. My face caught mid-argument, twisted into an unflattering grimace, my vulnerability exposed for the world to feast upon. Her words, twisted and distorted, accusing me of being a man-eater, of stealing a young man's future, of being a desperate old woman preying on the innocent. The narrative was set, the judgment swift and brutal, fueled by the insatiable appetite of the internet for scandal and outrage. The comment sections exploded, a cesspool of hatred and moral superiority. Strangers hiding behind anonymous profiles tore me apart piece by piece with their comments, their memes, their righteous indignation. My name. My face became a punchline, a cautionary tale. I was a spectacle, a public pariah strung up for all to see. The social pressure escalated with terrifying speed, a suffocating blanket that wrapped around me tighter and tighter with each passing day. Neighbors, who had always offered a friendly wave or a quick chat over the fence, now averted their eyes, their whispers following me like a shadow as I walked down the street. The once familiar hum of community had turned into a low, menacing growl. Acquaintances I'd known for years, people I considered friends, suddenly became busy, their phone calls unanswered, their invitations non-existent. They crossed the street to avoid me, their faces a mixture of awkwardness and thinly veiled disapproval. My world, once small and predictable, became a hostile, suffocating cage, every glance a judgment, every silence a condemnation. I felt like an alien in my own home, in my own neighborhood, an intruder in my own skin. And then my children, my beautiful grown children, they were the ones who truly broke my heart, their rejection a wound deeper than any public shaming. "Mom, what have you done?" My son, Alex, 20, asked, his voice laced with a disgust I'd never heard before. His eyes filled with a cold disappointment that chilled me to the bone. "This is so embarrassing. Everyone at school is talking about it." My daughter, Clara, 18, simply looked at me with cold, disdainful eyes. Her face, a mask of youthful indignation. "You're embarrassing us, Mom. How could you? After everything Dad did for us." Their words, sharper than any stranger's, cut the deepest tearing at the very fabric of my being. They started avoiding my calls, responding with monosyllabic texts, eventually cutting off contact almost entirely. Their rooms, once filled with the sounds of laughter and music, became silent tombs. I was utterly, terrifyingly alone. The silence in my once bustling home became a deafening roar, a constant reminder of my perceived failure. I was a ghost in my own house, haunted by the echoes of a life that was no longer mine. Days bled into nights, a relentless blur of despair. I barely ate, barely slept, haunted by the hateful comments and the crushing weight of my children's disapproval. I locked myself in my room, the curtains drawn, the world outside, a blurry, hostile threat. The shame was a physical weight pressing down on my chest, making it hard to breathe, suffocating me with its relentless grip. I replayed every moment, every glance, every conversation with Dylan, searching for the moment I'd gone wrong, the unforgivable sin I'd committed. Had I been foolish? Desperate? Had I truly unknowingly crossed a line? Even if no physical boundaries were breached, was my desire for connection, for a flicker of happiness, so inherently wrong? The self-doubt was a venom slowly poisoning my mind, dissolving my sense of self. One night, staring at my reflection in the darkened window, a hollow-eyed stranger staring back, something shifted. A flicker, not of anger, not of self-pity, but of clarity. A tiny spark of defiance in the vast ocean of despair. I was broken, yes. My heart was shattered, my reputation in tatters. But I wasn't a monster. I hadn't done anything wrong. I had simply felt. And was that a crime? Was it a crime to yearn for human connection, to feel a spark of life after years of quiet existence? The thought, once terrifying, now felt like a lifeline. I had nothing left to lose. My privacy was gone, my relationship strained, my spirit crushed. But I still had my voice. I got up, my limbs heavy, but a new resolve hardening in my gaze, and walked to my computer. My hands trembled as I set up the camera, the ring light illuminating my raw, tear-streaked face, every line of exhaustion and pain starkly visible. This wasn't about looking good. It was about being real. I took a deep breath, and I started to speak, my voice raspy, unfamiliar, but firm. "Hi," I began, my voice barely a whisper at first, then gaining strength. "My name is Lily, and you probably know me as that woman, the one who's been all over social media, the one being called names I won't repeat." I paused, gathering my strength, my eyes scanning the empty room as if addressing a vast, unseen audience. I'm not here to ask for sympathy. I'm here to tell my side of the story, not because I owe anyone an explanation, but because I owe it to myself. I owe it to the woman I am and the woman I'm trying to become. I spoke about Mark, about the 6 years of quiet solitude, the years of putting my children first, of simply existing, of living a life that felt like a muted echo of what it once was. I spoke about the profound loneliness that had settled deep in my bones, a constant ache that no amount of busyness could truly fill. I spoke about Dylan, about how he entered my life, not with grand gestures or romantic overtures, but with kindness, with respect, with an understanding that felt like a lifeline in my isolated world. I never not once asked Dylan for anything. I affirmed my voice, gaining strength, each word a deliberate act of courage. I never asked him to leave anyone. I never asked him to commit. And for the record, nothing physical ever happened between us. Not a single boundary was crossed. Our connection was one of conversation, of shared laughter, of simply being present. I looked directly into the camera, my eyes unwavering, a silent plea for understanding. What I will admit is this: I felt something. After years of feeling numb, after years of thinking that part of me had died with my husband, I felt a flicker of connection, a warmth, a happiness that anyone cared enough to listen to, spend time with me, to make me feel seen, truly seen, for the first time in what felt like an eternity. And yes, I was drawn to that. I was drawn to the feeling of being alive again, of having my heart stir with something other than grief or duty. I never intended to steal anyone's youth. I never intended to cause anyone pain. I just felt. I allowed myself to feel, and for that I was crucified. My voice cracked, but I pushed through the raw emotion pouring out of me. Maybe I was foolish to feel something again. Maybe I was naive to think that a connection, however innocent, wouldn't be judged so harshly by a world so quick to condemn. Maybe I should have known better at my age, to guard my heart more fiercely. But I'm not ashamed that I still have a heart that can feel. I'm not ashamed that I wanted to feel something again, and I refuse to be shamed for it. My feelings are mine, and they are valid regardless of what anyone else thinks. I ended the video, my voice firm, despite the tears streaming down my face, leaving wet trails on my cheeks. My gaze was steady, defiant. Maybe I was foolish to feel something again, but I'm not ashamed that I still have a heart that can feel. The video went viral, not in the way the ex-girlfriend's post had a destructive wildfire of hate, but in a wave of unexpected empathy, a gentle tide of understanding that washed over the digital landscape. Comments poured in, not of judgment, but of understanding, of shared humanity. Women and men from all walks of life shared their own stories of loneliness, of societal pressure, of daring to feel again, after loss or hardship, after divorce, after years of self-neglect. Many who had been victims of similar public shaming came forward offering solidarity, defending my right to simply feel, to exist, to hope for a future that wasn't defined by my past. The narrative shifted slowly but surely from condemnation to compassion, a quiet revolution of empathy. Dylan's ex-girlfriend Chloe, overwhelmed by the backlash against her own actions, by the sheer volume of people who now saw her as the aggressor, posted a public apology. It was brief, perhaps not entirely sincere, a forced concession to public opinion, but it was there, a small victory, a ripple of justice in the chaotic digital sea. It didn't erase the pain, but it acknowledged it, a tiny step towards closure. Then the messages from my children started. Tentative at first. "Mom, are you okay?" A simple text from Alex. Then a call from Clara, her voice hesitant, unsure. "Mom, I watched your video." Slowly, painstakingly, they began to understand. We had long, difficult conversations, filled with tears and raw honesty. They listened. They heard the raw pain in my voice, the vulnerability in my story, the years of unspoken loneliness that had driven me to seek connection. They began to understand the immense pressure I had been under, the profound loneliness I had carried, the quiet sacrifices I had made for them. The distance between us began to shrink, replaced by a fragile but growing understanding and a renewed sense of family. It wasn't an overnight fix, but it was a start, a path towards healing, brick by painful brick. 6 years. 6 years since Mark, my husband, the anchor of my universe, was taken by an illness that ravaged him too quickly, leaving me adrift in a sea of grief and single parenthood. I was barely 34 then, a young widow with 2 teenagers who suddenly had to navigate a world without their father and I, a world without my partner. The initial shock had been a merciful numbness, a thick blanket that muffled the screams of my soul. But then came the sharp, agonizing pangs of absence. The empty side of the bed, the silent dinner table, the missing laughter, the profound void where his presence used to be. Every mundane task became a monumental effort. I learned to compartmentalize, to push the grief down, deep within, for the sake of my children. I had to be strong for them, even when my own world felt like it was crumbling around me. We lived in a small, peaceful neighborhood, the kind where everyone knows everyone, and privacy is a luxury you rarely afford. The houses were close, the fences low, and the gossip a constant low hum beneath the surface of polite smiles and friendly waves. My job, a regular office gig, paid the bills. It wasn't glamorous, certainly not enough to splurge on luxuries, but it was stable. It was enough. We got by. My kids, bless them, grew up fast. I married young, so by the time Mark passed, they were already on the cusp of adulthood. My son Alex, 14, and my daughter Clara, 12. I poured every ounce of my being into them, their school projects, their sports, their teenage dramas. Their lives became my life, a consuming focus that left little room for my own needs or desires. Now at 20 and 18, they're practically adults themselves, navigating their own lives, their own burgeoning independence, their own dreams. And I was just Lily, a mother, a widow, a woman who had learned to live with the quiet hum of solitude, a constant companion in the background of my days. I had grown accustomed to the feeling of being invisible, a background character in my own life, content to watch my children flourish, believing my own story was complete. Life, I thought, would continue its calm, predictable rhythm. I'd wake up, go to work, come home, cook dinner, maybe read a book, and then repeat. The days blurred into weeks, weeks into years. The sharp edges of grief had softened, replaced by a dull ache, a constant companion that no longer brought me to my knees, but simply reminded me of what was lost. I went to the small gym a few minutes' walk from my house, mostly out of a sense of duty to my aging body, a desperate attempt to fend off the inevitable creeping aches and stiffness that 40 years of life and 6 years of quiet stress had begun to imprint upon me. It was a chore, another item on my to-do list, a place where I could sweat out some of the unspoken anxieties that clung to me. It was there, amidst the clanking weights and the rhythmic thud of treadmills, the faint scent of rubber and disinfectant, that Dylan appeared. He was just 22, almost half my age. My kids were older than him. The thought alone was enough to make me cringe. He was the new trainer at the gym, all lean, muscle-bright eyes, and an easy smile that seemed to light up the whole room, even the dingy corners. He had a youthful energy that was almost blinding, a stark contrast to my own weary, measured movements. At first, it was just polite conversation. "Good effort, Lily. You're really pushing yourself today." Small, innocuous compliments about my workout, the kind trainers give to all their clients, rote and professional. I barely registered them, nodding politely, focused on finishing my reps. But then, the compliments started to shift subtly, almost imperceptibly, a lingering gaze that held mine a beat too long, a hand on my arm, just a touch to correct my form, but it felt different. A warmth spread through me, a faint, unfamiliar flutter in my chest like a butterfly stirring from a long slumber. I'd catch his eyes across the gym and he'd offer a soft, knowing smile, a smile that seemed to acknowledge something unspoken between us, something I couldn't quite name. And I, a woman who hadn't felt a genuine spark of anything beyond maternal love or quiet contentment in years, found myself inexplicably stirred a sensation both thrilling and terrifying. I'd laugh at myself in the mirror, a harsh, self-deprecating sound that echoed in the quiet confines of my bathroom. "Lily, you're 40. 40? This is ridiculous. You're acting like a schoolgirl with a crush. Have you lost your mind?" The age gap was a chasm wide and undeniable, a gaping maw that threatened to swallow any nascent feeling. It was absurd. It was embarrassing. It was a betrayal of everything I thought I was supposed to be. Yet the feeling persisted, a tiny, persistent flame in the darkness, refusing to be extinguished by my rational mind. It was a whisper of possibility, a hint that perhaps, just perhaps, I wasn't entirely dead inside. Dylan wasn't just handsome. He was incredibly perceptive, almost impossibly so for someone so young. He seemed to see past the lines on my face, past the weary eyes, to something deeper. He wasn't pushy, never forced anything. He was just there, quietly supportive. He'd offer encouragement, a gentle word, when I looked tired, a shared laugh over a clumsy moment, a knowing glance when I finally nailed a difficult exercise. He remembered small details about my day, my kids, my preferences. He made me feel seen, truly seen for the first time in years, not just as a mother or a widow, but as Lily. And then the invitation started. "Fancy grabbing a quick bite after your session?" "Lily, my treat." Simple dinners at the local diner, casual coffee at the corner cafe, nothing overtly romantic, no candlelit tables or grand gestures, just easy conversation, shared stories, and a sense of lightness I hadn't realized I'd been missing. We talked about everything, his dreams, my past, the mundane details of our days, and the big questions about life. These simple outings slowly, insidiously became the highlight of my day. I'd find myself checking the clock, counting down the hours until our next gym session, our next casual meal. It was a dangerous, exhilarating anticipation, a secret joy I guarded fiercely, knowing it could be snatched away at any moment. The guilt, though, was a constant companion, a shadow that clung to me, growing darker with each passing day. It gnawed at me, a relentless parasite, feeding on my peace of mind. Mark was gone, but his memory, his presence was still so vivid, so sacred. How could I even think of feeling this way about another man, let alone one so young, so full of life and future? Was I betraying Mark? Was I dishonoring his memory by daring to feel something new? My children. They were grown, yes, but they still needed me, still looked to me for stability and guidance. What would they think? What would anyone think? The judgment of society loomed large, a dark cloud, threatening to engulf me, to smother this fragile new spark. I knew with a chilling certainty exactly how people would see me, a desperate middle-aged woman preying on a young man, a cougar, in the most derogatory sense of the word. The whispers, the stares, the pity mixed with scorn. I could already feel them even before they materialized, a suffocating blanket of disapproval. I imagined the pointed fingers, the knowing glances, the hushed conversations behind cupped hands. The fear of being exposed, of being labeled, was a constant knot in my stomach, a cold dread that never quite left me. I voiced my fears to Dylan once late one evening, after a particularly long conversation at a quiet cafe, the steam from our coffee cups curling between us like a soft barrier. "Dylan," I started, my voice barely a whisper, my gaze fixed on the condensation on my glass. "Why me? Why someone? Like me, I'm almost twice your age. My life is complicated. I have a past children who are nearly your age." He just smiled, that gentle, knowing smile that always disarmed me, that seemed to peel back the layers of my insecurity. He reached across the table, his fingers lightly touching mine, a touch that was both comforting and electric, and his words, so simple, yet so profound, resonated deep within me, challenging every self-deprecating thought I'd ever had. "Because you know who you are, Lily. You don't play games. You've lived, you've loved, and you're real. That's what I admire, Lily. There's a depth to you, a quiet strength that I haven't found in anyone else. You're not trying to be someone you're not. You're authentic, and that's incredibly rare and incredibly beautiful." His words were a balm, a temporary reprieve from the relentless self-flagellation. He never pressured me, never pushed for more than I was ready to give. He simply existed, a quiet, steady presence that made me feel seen, truly seen, for the first time in years. He didn't demand, he simply offered. His admiration felt genuine, untainted by expectation. It was a feeling I hadn't realized I craved so desperately. I was still wrestling with my feelings, trying to reconcile the woman I was supposed to be, the grieving widow, the devoted mother, with the woman who was against all odds, feeling something akin to joy again, a fragile tentative happiness that felt both exhilarating and terrifying. The internal battle raged on a silent war within my own heart, a conflict between duty and desire. Dylan and Lily. We remained friends. After everything. The respect between us was undeniable, a bond forged in the crucible of public scrutiny. But the rush, the desperate need for connection had subsided. The intense emotional entanglement had dissolved, replaced by a calmer, more mature appreciation. I saw him for who he was, a kind, empathetic young man who had perhaps unknowingly offered me a mirror to my own longing for life, a catalyst for a profound self-discovery. And I, in turn, saw myself more clearly stripped bare of societal expectations and self-imposed limitations, a stronger, more authentic version of myself emerging from the ashes. I realized something profound in the quiet aftermath of the storm, in the gentle hum of my newly refound peace. Sometimes what we need isn't romance or a grand love story or even someone to fill the void left by loss. Sometimes what we need isn't romance but the courage to forgive ourselves for wanting to feel alive again. It was about reclaiming my own heart, my own emotions without shame or apology. It was about understanding that no one has the right to judge another simply because they dared to allow themselves to feel a flicker of emotion once more. Feelings have no age, only sincerity. It was about accepting that my journey of healing was my own, and that daring to feel, even if it led to pain, was a testament to my resilience, not my weakness. This journey, this public crucible, taught me that. It taught me that healing isn't linear, and sometimes the most profound lessons come from the most painful experiences. It taught me that my heart, though scarred, was still capable of beating a feeling of yearning for connection, and that in itself was a victory, a quiet triumph of the spirit. If Lily's story resonated with you, I invite you to reflect on your own experiences. Have you ever felt judged for your emotions, for daring to feel something again after a period of loss or loneliness? Share your story in the comments below. Let's create a space where we can all acknowledge the unspoken echoes of our hearts. And for more stories that dive deep into the human experience, make sure to subscribe to Midnight on Reddit,